It was this scream/screech/howl that froze me in place with a fear I've never experienced before until that point, which had the aroma of the most putrid rotten meat mixed with stale urine and feces. I knew this thing had an intelligence unlike anything I've ever seen in an animal. It looked like it knew I wasn't supposed to see it, but did. One of the weirder phenomena that I've covered on this channel is the story of the Dogman, which is described as basically an anthropoid dog or wolf, like a large wolf or dog that stands up on two legs like a man and kind of acts a little bit like a human would. And I think this was first popularized by the late, great Linda Godfrey, who is the author of the book The Beast of Bray Road and Hunting the American Werewolf. And I think her stories, she interviewed a bunch of people who claim to have seen this thing, mostly in the Midwestern United States, and it has a bit of a precedent in, there are some kind of, more like urban legends, I think, from the Midwest that describe this kind of thing, and there's plenty of eyewitnesses. In my videos, I've done, I think, 2 videos on this subject. I've kind of looked into the Canadian legends, because I focus on Canadian legends, and it's very rare in Canada, but it is one variation of the old French-Canadian loup-garou or werewolf legend. It's from like Quebec, Montreal, Trois-Rivières, and it's also an Acadian legend from like Nova Scotia, part of the folklore of the French Canadians or Acadians who used to live there before the expulsion during the 7 Years' War. And it also appears in a couple very obscure native legends from the western provinces like Alberta, British Columbia, and also the Northern Territories, specifically Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Other than that, it's quite rare in Canada to find Dogman stories. But in this video, we're going to check out some of my subscriber comments describing their own Dogman encounters in, I think, mostly the United States. So the first one is, in 69-64, 3 years ago, former soldier here. A while back, I went into private security and got hired into a site in the middle of nowhere, guarding new construction overnight. I've seen both a Dogman and a Wendigo. The funny thing was, the Wendigo disappeared when the Dogman showed up, and for several months to the end of my post there, everything was quiet. So first off, I'm 6'5", weigh 260 pounds, I'm an avid weightlifter, and I'm in pretty solid shape. That and this post would let me wear full kit with a 12 gauge. So there wasn't a great deal of things that intimidated me when I was on that post. With that out of the way, in a very cold February and March, I saw a Wendigo, or at least bits of it, in the tree line surrounding my post. Because I hadn't seen a full silhouette of it, I was able to just mark it as my brain playing tricks on me due to its being early morning. Until one morning, roughly 2 weeks later, a fog set in. The forest surrounding me went silent, and I just happened to be out of my car on foot patrol on the front part of the property when I heard it. It was this scream/screech/howl that froze me in place with a fear I've never experienced before until that point. Once I overcame it, I darted towards my vehicle so I could get to the shotgun. From that point on, I would see a slender humanoid figure every now and then in the tree line and feel like something was watching me with malevolent intent every time I would exit my vehicle. It was made worse when the building was eventually put together enough to where I'd have to do patrols of it. Every now and then, I'd hear my co-workers' voices down a corridor calling my name. This was a problem because it was a one-man post, and my co-workers lived anywhere from 40 to 70 miles away. By this point, I was acutely aware of what Wendigos were capable of, and just ignored it and walked back to my vehicle. Then for a solid week, nothing happened. No noises, no eerie feelings. No figures in the tree line, nothing. I still kept my guard up on my patrols, thinking it was a trick trying to get me to drop my guard. At this point, the site had a see-through fence up surrounding the property. It was a good 7 feet high. One night towards the end of that quiet week, I came out of the building, got in my vehicle, and turned on the floodlights to see bright yellow eyes staring back at me over that 7-foot fence nearly 75 yards away. I thought to myself, okay, it's making its move, time to fight. I had my 12 gauge loaded with Brennecke Black Magics, turned up the song I had on at the time, and rushed towards those glowing eyes. The closer I got to it, though, I realized I wasn't looking at a Wendigo. I was looking at a Dogman. It was over 8 feet tall. Its head was that of a wolf, and it was a good 1.5 feet higher than the fence. Its shoulders were at least 5 feet wide, and it was rippled with muscle. It just stood there, looking at my vehicle and me. At that point, I reassessed and stared at him for a good 30 seconds to see what it would do. Nothing. It was like a stone sentinel just waiting. Not knowing much about dogmen at that point, and only hearing them mentioned at my Wendigo research, I decided to leave it alone. That, and I wasn't certain I could kill it, nor was I certain what kind of intellect it possessed. I didn't know what it would do if I tried to take a picture of it, so I went back up to the guardhouse and didn't go near that area the entire night. Interestingly enough, everything was quiet from that point on. No weird, slender human figures in the tree line, no noises associated with the Wendigo, no dead silence in the forest, no strange noises in the building, no feelings of dread or terror, nothing. Everything felt at peace from that point on. I came to think of the Dogman as a guardian more than a monster. Your friend isn't crazy. I'm not sure which friend he's referring to. I wish I would have written down what videos these comments were made on. But let's go to the next one. Arvid Slimanis, 2928, 3 years ago. This is a very long-time subscriber. Love it. We here in Latvia have a mythological creature called Sumpernus, and it seems to be similar to a North American cryptid Dogman. What is interesting, in almost all legends, it is specifically told that a Sumpernus is not a werewolf, since werewolf is a man capable of turning to a wolf, and not necessarily evil, while the Sumpernus, or Dogman, is an evil creature, and sworn enemy of mankind, and used to even have kingdoms, from where they used to raid human settlements. Now that is consistent with an old legend from northern Canada. It's an old Dene legend about a tribe of dog-headed or wolf-headed men who lived far to the west, which, from the description, almost sounds like Siberia, or like an island in like the Bering Sea or something. That story was collected by a priest, a kind of controversial Catholic priest, like a missionary. I think it was Father Emile Petito, and I believe he got that from the Hare Indians, who live on the western shores of Great Bear Lake. I think they're also called the Satu Dene. But let's check out the Sumpernus. Okay, so I've got a translated Wikipedia page here. It says basket, but this is translated from Latvian, so maybe that's one translation of Sumpernus. Anyway, it says a dog-faced monster, also called a dog-faced monster in Latvian mythology, is an evil humanoid creature with a human torso and a dog's head, sometimes also a bird's head, one eye or one leg, who lives in large forests and dresses in tree leaves. Enraged, the dog-faced monster attacks people, tearing them apart, eating their flesh and drinking their blood. If the person is not eaten immediately, the dog-faced monster is said to have tied them up and held them captive until they are eaten. Sometimes the dog-faced monster is contrasted with people in their characteristics, for example as a human flesh-eater, as opposed to a human flesh-eater, a nomad/hunter as opposed to a human farmer, and a speaker of incomprehensible language as opposed to a human-speaking person. And they've got this picture here of a giant wolf in the forest. So that's the Latvian Dogman, the Sumpernus. If you'd like to watch this video without ads, please consider becoming a member of this channel and watching the ads-free version instead. You can do this on your phone or desktop by clicking the picture of my face and then clicking the join button to the right of the subscribe button. For only $2 Canadian per month, or about $1.45 US, you can watch my members-only videos and get an icon of a little Canadian monster beside your name every time you post a comment on my channel, which will change with the amount of time you've been a member. Since times are tough, I've decided to add a lower membership tier, which will give you access to my members-only videos for only $1 Canadian per month, or about 72 American cents. For my viewers in Madagascar who can't afford this, I apologize. Sorry for the interruption, and enjoy the video. Next comment is Daniel Terhorst, 9995, 1 year ago. Yes, finally, I'm obsessed with these things after having seen one on 2 separate occasions. Once alone at 14 in 84, and once with my wife 12 years later. She didn't believe my original sighting until our unbelievable encounter. Thank you for your wonderful storytelling and enthralling stories. I wish you'd elaborate. That sounds like an interesting story. Next one's Angel Daydam, 9359, 1 year ago. Oh, they can add my town to Dogman Encounter now. I am Angel, that I've been seeing them for over an 8-year period. My pictures I take of them turn out blurry, but you can definitely tell I had them bang on my home. They follow us, watch every day and at night. It full Port Elgin Dogman. Port Elgin, where's that? So it looks like Port Elgin is on the southeastern shores of Lake Huron. Okay, let's go to the next one. Paul Holbrook, 7315, 2 years ago. Read this. Tom Powell is a former science teacher and a longtime Bigfoot and paranormal researcher who's written 2 excellent books on these subjects, The Locals and Edges of Science. In the second book, he states that he and other Bigfoot and paranormal researchers sometimes find themselves in over their heads. They are sometimes confronted by threatening entities who seem like they're intending to attack. Powell states that he and other Bigfoot and paranormal researchers have found a way out of such situations. He states, "Say loudly and with conviction that you know Jesus and are friends with Jesus and that he protects you. Remember this should you encounter any threatening dogman, werewolves, Bigfoot, skinwalkers, demons, reptilians, wendigos, or other hostile paranormal entities. If you live in a rural area where such entities are around, tell this to the family, friends, neighbors, and especially children. You might just save someone." So this kind of does accord with the Newfoundland fairy stories. They say that, which I think a lot of it comes from Irish and English folklore, but if you are being bothered by fairies in the woods, they say, you can drop to your knees and start praying, and they'll leave you alone. And I think sometimes even just making the sign of the cross is sufficient to get them to stop bothering you. Like if they're making you see terrain that's not there or something like that. That's a pretty common theme in Newfoundland fairy lore. Next one is Kyle Maurice, 4870, 2 years ago. Some believe the Cheyenne dog soldiers were similar to werewolves. I've also read a theory that the Michigan Dogman was a Cheyenne dog soldier. Part of the theory, the Michigan Dogmen never harmed anyone. The dog soldiers, by many accounts, did not attack unarmed men. I believe that's where the theory comes from. It's believed in some theories that the Beast of Bray Road and the Michigan Dogman is the same cryptid, but we may never know. So what are the Cheyenne dog soldiers? Oh, okay, so it says the dog soldiers are historically one of 6 Cheyenne military societies. Okay, so they're not dogmen, they're military societies. I know about this in Canada, like the Blackfoot have them, the Cree have them, the Plains Cree have them. It's like a secret society. They have their own rituals. I don't think there's anything paranormal about them except for, I guess, the rituals that they do. Let's just take a look. Dog soldiers here on Wikipedia, for what it's worth. Historically, dog soldiers have been regarded as both highly aggressive and effective combatants. One tradition recalls that in battle, they would pin themselves to a chosen piece of ground, and through an unusually long breechclout, rear apron by use of one of 3 sacred arrows that they traditionally carried into battle. So they're a warrior society, unless there's something I don't know about. Okay, next one's Jesse Greywolf, 2 years ago. Another long-time commenter. My son saw a dogman in 2000 while we were camping in the southern interior of BC, British Columbia. I had not even heard of it then, and was not sure what he was describing. Later, I read Linda Godfrey discussing it on Art Bell. So in southern British Columbia, your son saw a dogman in 2000. And I'll say British Columbia is one of the few places in Canada where there are native legends that are consistent with the dogman sightings that are usually in the Midwest. Next comment is James Moyes, 3006, 2 years ago. I'm going to tell you something. I grew up in northern Ontario, and we were kids in August whipping around on the dirt bikes back in the 70s. We came around a corner and there was something standing there eating corn. And anybody that knows livestock, corn grows to be about 7 or 8 feet tall. This thing threw it to the side and started angling us off, running away from us. It brought it much closer very quickly. It looked us in the eye. My girlfriend screamed. You've never seen anything like that before. So, story from Northern Ontario. Next one's Age of Deception, 67, 2 years ago. Dogmen are here in Australia, too. My advice after encountering one of these creatures is don't go looking for them. Don't go hiking, fishing, camping alone, ever. I was very lucky to be close to my vehicle, and I had a high-powered firearm that afternoon. I encountered a dogman. Otherwise, I don't think I'd be here typing this comment. This creature chased me in my car going 80 kilometers per hour on a dirt road out in a national forest for about 2 to 3 kilometers before it gave up the chase. I knew these creatures existed in America, but I never thought they were here in Australia. That was 12 years ago when I was a feral animal control officer. I suffered PTSD for 10 years, and only in the past 2 years I've been able to go back out into national parks, but not alone. That does seem to be a common theme with really odd creatures like the dogman or like the pale crawler. Like, people who see them have an extremely negative reaction to it. Like they're traumatized from it for many years. So that's interesting. An Australian story. The next commenter is Brittany Furman, 8193, 2 years ago. Seen this thing driving to work one early morning in October. It ran up on my vehicle and reared up as I passed by speedily to get away. Later, another person I know was driving home from work early one morning, like 2 or 3 a.m., and they seen it leaving a neighborhood. This is in northern Illinois, so maybe they travel great distances, or maybe they are many. Next one's Archangel 5627, 3 years ago. I have an uncle who lives in New Hampshire, and a cousin who lives in Maine. Whenever I visit my uncle, I always make a point to see my cousin in Maine afterwards. Both my cousin and I are quite the outdoorsmen, and we both enjoy wilderness camping, hiking, and hunting. One year, we decided to go camping in Mount Katahdin on the Appalachian Trail, and I gotta say, the stories of how remote this place is don't do it any justice until you've actually experienced it for yourself. We didn't have any issues the first night we camped. It wasn't until our third night where things got interesting. On our third day, we hiked out a bit further to change up the scenery, and it was on that hike where we both felt like something was watching us. Not to mention that we kept smelling a terrible odor the further out we hiked. At that point, we hadn't seen anything to prove our suspicions until we set up camp that night. After going to bed, we were both woken up by the sounds of what we thought were coyotes or wolves walking around our camp. What made the whole experience that much more alarming is that our entire camp smelled like what we had been smelling earlier that day, which had the aroma of the most putrid rotten meat mixed with stale urine and feces. It was enough to make us gag in our tent. So we decided to take out our firearms and hold down our tent until daylight, hoping nothing would get ballsy enough to enter. Luckily, nothing happened, but our camp was a huge mess the next day. Needless to say, we packed up and hiked out of there. So like I said, I've never seen a dogman per se, but I know deep down in my gut that I encountered one with my cousin on that particular camping trip. Now, the terrible smell is interesting, not only because in many wildman reports, like Sasquatch Bigfoot encounters, people recall smelling a terrible smell, usually like rotten meat or rotting garbage or burning rubber or something, right before their encounter or in the midst of their encounter. Not only that, though, the smell of rotten meat and feces is also very common with ghost stories and stories of, poltergeist stories, demonic oppression stories, kind of your standard supernatural stories where something from the spirit world is interacting with somebody. So that would kind of bolster the idea that the dogman is some sort of preternatural entity instead of a cryptid, like an animal that lives in the wilderness. Next one's Brian's Logic 3 years ago. This might sound bizarre, but Ireland has a history of dogmen from back in medieval times and before. A lot of Celtic tribes moved to North America a long time before Columbus, so it's possible that the dogman clans also immigrated over, as all our oak forests were eventually decimated by the British also, as they needed the wood for warships, leaving the dogman clans nowhere to live anyway. We called them Fowla, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, and they were highly respected as the great warriors on the island. Encounters with Fowla are nearly not heard of now in Ireland. Let's check it out, Fowla. So I'm getting this Wikipedia article called The Werewolves of Ossory. The legendary werewolves of Ossory, a kingdom of early medieval Ireland, are the subject of a number of accounts in medieval Irish, English, and Norse works. The werewolves were said to have been the descendants of a legendary figure called Laenech Fowlad, whose line gave rise to the kings of Ossory. The legends may have derived from the activities of warriors in ancient Ireland, who were the subject of frequent literary comparisons to wolves, and who may have adopted lupine hairstyles or worn wolfskins while they went wolfing and carried out raids. Well, that's super interesting. I've never heard of this before. Very cool. Next commenter is Mycela Universe 9096, 3 years ago. As a child, I saw one of these beings standing watching me through the blinds in my window. It jumped a 7-foot fence. When I realized the beast before me was real, I went into a protective defensive stance / mindset over my brother. I balled my fists and stared it down for some reason. It had no eyes, by the way. It grinned like an adult smirking at a kid who thinks he's got a chance. Cute. Went from a slight smirk to a full snarl in seconds. As soon as I submitted in fear, it returned to normal. Right there was the scariest part, because right then and there, I knew this thing had an intelligence unlike anything I've ever seen in an animal. I believe there are several types of these beings running around, some more man-like and some more werewolf-like. And that's the thing that Linda Godfrey would always talk about in her books, How the people that she interviewed who saw these things said that they seemed to be intelligent, not like an animal. Next commenter is Donna 4147 3 years ago. I grew up on Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Ever since we moved to the house when I was 11 years old, we didn't go outside at night. Made sure everything was locked and secure by sunset. And as a kid, I used to barricade my bedroom windows so that whatever was out there couldn't look in. It was no surprise when the first sighting was made very near the house. I always knew it was there. Just didn't know what it was. I've been fascinated by cryptids ever since. Next comment's Franz Doreza 5230 2 years ago. I also grew up near Elkhorn in Fontana and Lake Geneva, near Abbey Springs, and my father lived in Elkhorn later on. He was a doctor near Delavan, and then Aurora Healthcare. So sometimes we'd take Bray Road just for the scenic route, and this was before we knew anything about it. But later on in Brockwood Estates, near our home, we heard deep growling noises that I didn't recognize. The forest near my uncle's place in Brockwood was always dead silent at certain times. Their home was in a ravine, and dozens of deer, wild turkeys, pheasants, rabbits, etc. would cross right over their driveway and down the ravine, quite often, and then complete silence. Not even birds or crickets. It's a trail for animals, and it's very possible they would follow them through that ravine. I haven't seen one yet, but at least I'm aware. Next commenter is Disco Jelly 2 years ago, and he's responding to somebody. There's encounters in a lot of these creatures in Kentucky and in southern Oklahoma. I've spoken to folks who have fired at one. The same thing in most all eyewitness accounts. The animal or creature was affected by the round, but not dead. Our research team encountered what we believe was a group of Dogman creatures in 2020 in the Kiamishi Mountains near our camp. One of our team fired a 9mm round at it at 25 yards, causing it to run. If you're an expert on how to put one of these creatures' heads on a wall, by all means have it. So where's the Kiamishi Mountains? Okay, it's in Oklahoma, southern states. I probably pronounced that wrong. I'm pronouncing it like they do in New Brunswick, some of the old French names. Next commenter is Paul Redinger, 5830, 2 years ago. And he's replying to the same guy that the previous commenter replied to. He says, let me guess you're a city boy and have never been into a deep forest. They exist. I've seen one within 20 to 25 yards while deer hunting. If you believe or not, that's your choice. But one day the proof will be there for everyone. The authorities suppress the information. Imagine the impact on lumber, state parks, federal parks, and other outdoor activities. Would you take your kids camping if you knew they were there? I've had 2 Bigfoot encounters too, all in Michigan, in November, near the towns of Lincoln, Hoxeyville, and Brighton, Michigan. That before-mentioned Dogman was within 5 miles of downtown Brighton. These occurred in the late 80s to early 90s. I wouldn't go into any forest without being armed, and I've always had a weapon close in case. I now live in a small city surrounded by miles of wheat-type fields in Australia. So a Michigan story. There's that song, The Michigan Dogman, which I think is based on sightings just like these. Next commenter is Krista Taylor, 4477, 3 years ago. Anyone ever see a glowing being about 5 feet tall? It was by my doghouse. I came to it about 15 feet away before looking up and noticing it. My mom saw it out the window after I ran inside. Always wondered what it was. Scared me as a 14-year-old, but now I know what I saw. Okay, I guess I must have filed this under the wrong category, but a glowing being about 5 feet tall. I don't know what that is. Next commenter is Suck My Jaggin, 3 years ago. How about the Navajo deputies who supposedly seen 7-foot-tall wolves with plaid shirts and fedora hats, smoking cigarettes, one with a long holder on the cig butt, leaning on the gate to the ranch store to the Gorman Ranch. Yeah, it was an Art Bell back in blank. Kind of reminds you of the stories from Utah's Skinwalker Ranch. I think people saw something almost exactly like that. Next comment's Under Fire 987, 3 years ago. I could share some pretty interesting findings in regard to what people call dogmen. I've seen them several times, no areas they live in. Over all these topics, people need to look at them in the broader picture of things. There is so much of a world that has been lied to us about. Really, it is not what it seems. If anyone here ever should encounter one of these beings, treat them with respect, and do not harass or threaten them in any manner. Even think thoughts of such. I don't know how they do it, but it seems many of these unknown creatures can read our thoughts by many reports, and they should leave you alone. Only use deadly force if you are truly under attack, and have no other option. Next comment is Sunny Prophet 4405, 3 years ago. I had been driving down a lonely, empty side road without streetlights in eastern Quebec, 2005. It was 8 p.m., and we drove in the pouring rain. The entire time there was only one other car roughly 50 feet in front of us, the whole ride, it seemed. I had been sitting in the middle back seat when the car in front suddenly hit his brakes, causing his bright red brake lights to shine, getting all of our attention. I had expected to see a downed tree or a dead tree in the road, but no, the car in front swerved to the right, causing us to swerve left. In the headlights stood a huge werewolf dogman, Sinophali, or whatever name you choose to call such a thing. I had a great view from the front, and then a close-up as it passed us on the right side of the car in the rear view. I will never forget the size of it. Just so massive in size and body, looked totally jacked. It had to somewhat bend over to look into the car. Of such a huge size, it couldn't be anything else. It was the most insane thing I've ever had to bear witness to, and I will never forget what it looked like. The beast had on a large cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and it was wearing what looked to be a cape as well, like something that Zorro or the Lone Ranger would be wearing. Okay, the last part I made up. It had a very dark fur, pointy ears like a German shepherd. I didn't see its tail, but its chest was ridiculously large. I wish people wouldn't put jokes in a encounter description like that. It kind of destroys its credibility, but this is in Quebec, which does have a long tradition of loup-garou or werewolf stories, which are usually just a human that transforms into a werewolf, but in some variations of it, like in one of Honoré Bougron's stories, it's described as like an anthropoid wolf. So I'm not sure what to make of that one. Next comment is Symptom of the Times 3 years ago. I live in Wisconsin, an hour or so from Elkhorn. They were in our conference in high school. Some creepy stories about dead deer being actively dragged from back of pickups while being cleaned up by road crews. I immediately put in my retirement. Next one's Agent Canine Mutt 3 years ago. In my good old home state of Alaska, every winter or so, the population of wildlife, especially moose and deer, along with cows, would simultaneously disappear for some time, and every night the noise of what sounded like a wolf howling in reverse, reverberating across the entire farm. It was so terrifying that cops put out warnings across our extremely small community. Some days the hunter boys would mention spotting a 11 to 10 foot tall person that standed on hind legs and covered in complete black, and that's how dog people and werewolf legends started in my isolated town of Alaska. Very cool. Very creepy. Next one's Kmart 6026 3 years ago. I've seen one. It was in Louisiana, just outside of a very small village called Duberly in Louisiana. I was 17 years old, and part of a hunting party. I was about 30 meters away from a fence line that housed a herd of teamed and farmed bred deer. I was sitting next to a salt tree stump, waiting for my grandfather to come back with discards from the previous deer we had hunted. Not all of the farmed deer, but a wild deer he had previously shot. I was on a highline known as the boneyard. It's where we always discarded animal entrails that are rank and of little use to us. I saw a creature's leg, then a shoulder, and it had the snout of a dog. It was about 7 feet tall. It made no noise, and it noticed me. Its eyes met mine, then it darted away. This thing looked straight into my eyes. It looked like it knew I wasn't supposed to see it, but did. It backed up and disappeared into the foliage. Weirdest thing ever. Never knew about these things, or thought they exist. I still remember the sun shimmering on its felt-like pelt. Could see its muscles through the thinner spots. So it had to look like it knew you weren't supposed to see it, which I guess would kind of support the idea that these things are not of this world. Maybe interdimensional or something. I really hate using that word, interdimensional, because it sounds so scientific. Like I'm a physicist who knows anything about dimensions. I don't at all. But something hidden behind the veil. Let's put it that way. Next comment is Ulfskin 1458, 3 years ago. My cousin reportedly encountered some sort of large canine standing upright along a road in Walworth County late at night. He maintains that what he saw was not a black bear or a dog, and looked quite strange. Where's Walworth County? I've heard of this before. Is it in Wisconsin? It is, so that's where Elkhorn is. Next comment's NoBub 6273, 3 years ago. My aunt was one of the high school students that got chased on Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road has been a legend in my family since as long as I can remember because of it. My uncle, brother of the aunt who was chased, also had a separate encounter while raccoon hunting. He and his story were featured on the Discovery Channel when they did a story about it. I've always been so interested in the subject. So another story from Wisconsin, Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which seems to be an epicenter of these stories. Next one's Missouri Mongoose, 8858, 3 years ago. I have a bluff behind my house that the Mississippians painted a dog-headed creature on over 1,000 years ago. Vid on my channel. Okay, let's check it out. Missouri Mongoose, 8858. Native Mississippian artwork. So I'm going to try to skip ahead if I can. So it looks like there's some red ochre or cinnabar renderings, possibly. And some petroglyphs carved in there. Very cool. These are like really good quality. My gosh. That is actually, if that is genuine, that is actually super cool. So I think I'm going to watch this more thoroughly. And if I can find that Dogman, I will include it. This is just a quick edit post-production. I went through the whole 9-minute video, and I'm not sure which one is supposed to be the Dogman. But in case you want to check it out for yourself, I'll include the link to the video in the description. Next one is I Will Take the Ring to Mordor 3 years ago. Great presentation. There are many stories of dog-headed people in India as well. Even St. Christopher was said to be a dog-headed man. Do a research on St. Christopher Doghead, and several classic paintings will come up. Fascinating. Thanks as always. Well, I've heard this before, that St. Christopher is sometimes portrayed as having a dog head, but I don't know the reason, so let's check it out. According to the Google AI, it says, in Eastern Orthodox tradition, St. Christopher is sometimes depicted with a dog's head to symbolize his origins as a fearsome, non-human or barbarian outsider before his conversion to Christianity. Interesting. Okay, and the dog-headed people in India, I think, is one of the many things that Pliny the Elder, I think it comes from Pliny the Elder's Naturalis Historia, who probably got it from an older Greek writer, which is typically what he drew his information from. In fact, I think I covered that briefly in a different video. Next one is Daniel Davis, 6288, 3 years ago. Herodotus distinguished between dog-headed people and werewolves in his histories, using different words, of course. There was a people cursed to occasionally become lupine, but there was also the people that the Romans and later Europeans called the cynocephali, who were very different. So it appears in the works of Greek historian Herodotus. I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. The next one's Helionosis, 2744, 3 years ago. It all begins with King Lycaon, and if you look at the several ancient accounts, remember this is pre-Greece, pre-Ice Age melt, so ending low sea levels time period. It is indeed not close to our time, or even ancient Greece for that matter. But the fact is of importance prior to exposure to the myths. I hate that word, to be honest. Love your books and videos, good sir. Keep up all the awesome work. Thank you very much. So King Lycaon, I think this is an ancient Greek legend. I think he was the king of Arcadia, which is like a kind of a rugged area in the Peloponnesian Peninsula in Greece, which is, I think, like one of the least populated parts of Greece, very mountainous and rugged. And there's lots of legends about it, of different things that live there. But I think the legend is that King Lycaon killed his son and cooked him up and fed him to Zeus or something. Or maybe he killed Zeus's son and fed him to Zeus. One of the two. But anyway, because of that, Zeus cursed him to have the head of a wolf. And I think there are other stories from Arcadia where people, this might have been like an ancient Greek legend that Pliny the Elder regurgitated or reproduced in his Naturalis Historia about people who, they would go across like a certain river and become wolves. Like they were, I guess, more like a werewolf story. And then they'd come back across the river and become men again. Something like that. I shouldn't talk about these things. I don't know. I'm not an expert, at least, on ancient mythology at all. Next comment's Kmart 6026, 3 years ago. I swear the creature that I saw and made eye contact with had an intelligence to it. Its eyes became large, similar to how a person's would be if they were shocked or surprised. After looking further, cynocephaly certainly has a little more credibility in my mind. Scouring the internet for pictures or images, and the photo a man took at a security guard post in and around Michigan in the 70s is the closest thing to what I saw, and is exactly as the ancient accounts of these beings are. Every encounter I've looked into shows that these creatures have an intelligent demeanour and live just on the fringes of society, with some even attempting to speak. No doubt a strange phenomenon. Next comment is Barb Gerhardt, 9501, 3 years ago. There are still people who have an overactive gland that causes their hair to grow thick and long like an animal. But there were stories about a tribe of dog people who lived on an island, and they were very savage towards regular humans. They were also cannibals. They are simply humans with a condition that causes them to have dog-like heads. There was a man who lived in the 1800s who was one of these people. He was otherwise a normal person. He married a normal person, and had children, some of whom had inherited his condition, and others who were like all other humans. He was a businessman and very successful. So I get the impression that in those days, someone like him was not discriminated against like we would think. It almost seems like people back then were more open to others' differences than we have been taught to think. He obviously had enough other people willing to interact with him in business, so I think there is maybe more to bigotry and ignorance now than in those days. Today, if someone was like him, do you think most businesses would even hire him, much less do business with him? I think not. They are all about image these days. In the past, it was more the inner character of a man that was important. If he was honest and trustworthy, his word was his contract. No need for written contracts to seal a business deal. A handshake was all that was needed. So, it's a bit of a vague story. I don't know if we can find out much about it based on the information that's been given here. But I will say that the island with dog-headed people on it, that is the old Dene legend I was mentioning earlier that was collected by Emile Petito. I think they lived on an island in like the Bering Sea or something. That's kind of what the story sounded like. But let's keep going. Next comment is Gerson H. Castillo, 1698, 3 years ago. I'm a Saskatchewan Cree, and we have a dogman living on our reservation, and his owner is a family of little people who can shapeshift. We are all friends. Next comment is Jeffrey Rowland, 2212, 3 years ago. I believe anything is possible anymore after the last few years of research. I live just south of the Manistee National Forest here in Michigan, where the legendary Michigan Dogman is reported to live. Residents of my town are said to have periodic sightings. Personally, I hope not, but if I do someday, I sure hope he is friendly. Next one's Missouri Mongoose, 8858. I think we mentioned him before. Yeah, he's the guy who had the video of the petroglyphs. He says, I'm from Missouri, and there was a red painting of one on a bluff behind my house. We were told it was made by the Mississippians around 1,000 years ago. I made a video on my channel showing it, if anyone wants to see. Next one's Andrew Bartleman, 9169, 3 years ago, and he's replying to Gerson H. Castillo. We have them on Vancouver Island as well. I am a Coast Salish native, and we're told not to speak of them, never make fun of them, and to always be careful as they are tricksters. I've been told it is a gift to see them. I have experiences with them, and find it interesting hearing of other stories. About the shapeshifting, that is very interesting. I know they can turn invisible in a couple of seconds, so shapeshifting definitely doesn't surprise me. Thanks for sharing. Next comment is Orong Hulu Bana, T09. This is a very interesting commenter. He's from Borneo, and he's shared some very, very cool stories on here before. But let's read this one. Greetings, everyone. I'm a descendant of the natives of the island of Borneo. I have the opportunity to go to school and get to know the outside world, unlike my brother and friends who still maintain a traditional life. My grandfather and father are traditional leaders and a respected shaman in the tribe, and other indigenous tribes. As a child, I used to follow my grandfather and father hunting on the rainy season. While talking hunting experiences with them, I was shown an area that is quite sacred for the indigenous people of this island. Thousands of years ago, when my ancestors set foot on this island already had a race consisting of blonde/red-haired forest men, and a dog-faced race. The big man was considered the protector of the forest, while the dog-faced tribe was hated, because it always destroyed crops and loved to kidnap children and women. After hundreds of years, my tribe and other native tribes performed a ritual to ask for protection, and according to the legend, the spirit of the forest sent a tribe of hairy men with large bodies to help the tribes there by hunting and killing the dog-faced tribes. Then there was a war between the native tribes here, with the help of a giant man to kill and eliminate the dog-faced tribe. Even though the legend is thousands of years old, until now, the effects of the war in the area are still there, where the soil is colored blood, as well as the trees and leaves in the area. If you are lucky, you can still find sword iron, arrowheads, and spears for the natives here. We will avoid going through this area as much as possible when hunting and gathering forest products, because until now, the area seems alive and awesome. Sorry if my writing is too long. I just share this story, because I feel my tribe and Asians also have the same story as the natives in Canada and America. Forgive me if my English is not fluent. Very cool. So an ancient battle between wild men, hairy wild giants, and dog-faced people. I almost want to collect all the stories by this guy because they're so interesting. Borneo is like an island in, I think it's a weird island. It's shared by Indonesia and by Malaysia, and I think part of it's its own country. Anyway, always cool to hear from this guy. This comments Tolton Havoc, 1706, 1 year ago. Myself and 2 friends have experienced the Dogman or something like it. We were in the woods of Yukon, walking along a trail at night, and out of nowhere, something started circling us really fast, but we couldn't see anything at all. One of my friends jumped into a sprint and ran to the beginning of the trail we followed, shortly behind. But what we saw once it stopped was a huge wolf-looking animal, with red eyes and huge drooling teeth. We still don't know what it was, or why it didn't maul us to death, because we knew for certain it was big enough and fast enough to do so. We just stayed out of the area for a good while, until our nerves were settled about it. So that's very interesting. The Tolton are people from, I think, northwestern British Columbia and southern Yukon. And from that general area, I think actually more in the Alaska area, there was another priest, a Catholic priest. I'm not sure what order he belonged to, but his name was Julius Chate. And he wrote about that the natives there believed in a goblin, he called it. I can't remember the native name of it. I want to say Santa Rotana, but I could be wrong. But it was supposed to be like, he called it a goblin in the shape of a wolf that would walk around, like prowling around, with like long nail-like claws. And I just remember reading that if it patted a child on the head, it was like a good omen or something. It was like good medicine for the child. I think it meant long life or something. So interesting story from the Yukon. Next one's Lizzie Songi, 1602, 1 year ago. Thank you for more great legends. They come in on notifications and sometimes I save them for a more relaxing time. Especially love the backgrounds. There is a man from Pennsylvania who gives a detailed story of an encounter with a similar cryptid in the huge old iron ore factory, where he and his friends were always told not to go. The beast chased them to the roof of the building, eyes glowing, fangs bared, until it left over huge dirt piles, seemingly melting into the air into the woods. He sweats, shakes, and even cries when telling of this encounter. Coupled with such detail, I don't believe he's lying. I wish I could give a more direct link, but it's on YouTube, and has been there for a good few years. I've watched it twice. So the encounter with something weird in an abandoned factory reminds me of, back on my viewer encounters with pale crawlers, somebody had a similar story, so that's an interesting connection. Next comments, Julio Govea, 9447, 1 year ago. I had a dream, or astral projection, I can't really tell the difference, when I was in Fernie, British Columbia, visiting my twin brother. We're from Brazil. I saw a dogman outside my cabin in my dream/projection. It had these sickly, yellowish, malevolent eyes. It throws chills through my spine every time I remember those eyes. It was pure hate. That's something that Linda Godfrey, in her stories, a recurring theme is people say that the look that this thing gave was one of malice, hatred, malevolence, very evil look. And I think we've just got one more here. Gina Wright, 3299, 7 months ago. I live in the central interior of British Columbia, and there are various versions of this content. The smell and size of these beings/beast is almost out of our brain's range to process. I seen something as a child. Smelly, large, shaggy type of animal. Coat hanging from its body. It had hands and a face like a bear. Never did find out what it was. So those are all the stories on my channel that I could find on encounters with the Dogman. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.